Hello, welcome to From Caracas. I'm Laura Prada. In this opportunity, we'll be talking with Robert Brown. He's a former Black Panther member and also member of the All African People's Revolutionary Party. We welcome him to From Caracas. In this opportunity, we'll be talking about the Afro-descendants fights and much more information regarding this topic. Just stay tuned with us. Welcome.
Thank you very much for inviting us.
Thank you for sharing your time with us. I want to ask you, why in this time is it important that Afro-descendant people defend their self-determination, their origins, and their right to be recognized as just part as well of the society, as the diversity of the society?
Well, I think that when you look around the world is on fire. In every major country and every major city in the world, there are some kinds of protests, some kinds of rebellions around the various social, economic, and political issues and problems that confront world humanity today. You see that people of color, especially African people, African descendants, indigenous people, are at the bottom of the society in almost every country that we live in, almost every country. And the cutbacks, the crisis of capitalism, the contradictions in the political system affect us most importantly. So it is extremely important for us as African people, as Afro-descendant people, to band together worldwide. We represent about 105 billion people in about 125 countries in the world, by our estimate. And in every one of those countries, we're having some kind of contradictions or problems. So it just makes common sense for us to try to come together to reason what are these problems we are facing, what are their origins, what can we do to maintain ourselves while we continue to escalate the fight.
You were saying that the world is on fire today with social protest, but it's not protest, it's not the claim only from Afro-descendant people. We are also seeing the claims of indigenous or indigenous peoples around the world. Why in this moment does originary people, Indians, Afro-descendants, originary people are in the streets? What have changed in the society that they are willing to step up? They are defending their right to being heard and respected.
Well, first of all, it's not just African or indigenous people in the streets. It's all people.
Why all people, not only?
Because all people are facing the contradictions of the problem. Capitalism is on crisis. You can measure it, you can see it in so many different ways. And that crisis affects every continent, every people, everywhere. 6 months ago, I was marching in the streets of Barcelona, Spain, and Barcelona and the other city. And when there are hundreds of thousands of people in the streets raising the question of the need for independence, the question of the austerity and the cutbacks. I was in Lisbon, Portugal, and you saw tens of thousands of Africans in the streets. And while the mass demonstrations were not as much in the so-called UK, we went through maybe 30 cities between England, Scotland, Wales, Northern and so-called Southern Ireland. And you saw small groups of people. We have literally been in the streets consistently for at least my lifetime. Sometimes there are millions of people in the streets, sometimes there are only 2 or 3. But the fight back, the struggle has been consistent and unbroken. In many ways, indigenous people, I mean, from the moment of their reawakening in the late 1960s till now, there have been peaks, ups and downs in their movement as well.
Do you consider this is the highest peak that we've seen in the 20th, 21st century of this revolution on social movements, on the claims of the poor, of the people that have been marginalized by so long time in the world?
Yeah, I think it's very much one of the highest peaks, and you can see it two ways. You know, Colin Nkrumah once said that there are moments in history that are hard to discern, yet fate that slip by. Certainly, the coup in Bolivia is one indication of that. But it is not just Bolivia. It is a coup directed against the indigenous people in the entire hemisphere. You know, I know a little bit about the struggles of indigenous people to try to unite, to try to coordinate their struggles. In the mid-1980s, more than 400 of the top revolutionary and youth leadership from Canada down to Chile met in Tripoli, Libya, in order to form a united front of the indigenous peoples of the Western Hemisphere. Unfortunately, with the death of certain, Indian leadership in the Western Hemisphere and the overthrow of Libya, that was set back. But with the emergence of Evo Morales to power, that was not simply a struggle waged against, the indigenous people of Bolivia. It is a struggle against the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. I don't think it was accidental in terms of timing that the coup coincided with the Afrodescendant Congress, which was meeting here in Caracas.
Just after was held an Originary People Congress also here in Caracas.
And we've seen this happen before. You know, the 7th Pan-African Conference in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. Within hours of the closing of that conference, 2 presidents were killed in a plane, and that resulted in the genocide of millions of people in Rwanda and Burundi, and the genocide in the Eastern Africa and the Congo. So you see, this orchestration, of problems. But I guess it was Einstein or somebody, Newton, whose one of the first laws of motion, I believe is called, that for every action there is a reaction. It is equal or greater, immediate or delayed. You see the reactions, the mobilization of millions of people here in Caracas to defend and have solidarity with the Bolivian struggle. I haven't been able to see the news worldwide since I've been here, but I am sure that there are mass demonstrations, mass movements, mass discussions in every corner of the world. Our problem is that even though we have the technology that permits it, we don't have the consciousness necessary to better coordinate and better plan this common struggle.
You mentioned the Afrodescendant Congress held here recently in Caracas, in Venezuela, and it was presided by an Originarious People Congress also. How do we come to realizing that there's a need for a Congress, for a convention where originary people, where Afro-descendants meet and talk and share the ideas of the society that must be built and how society have improved or how society have withdrawn from these kind of social standards that, of course, put on by capitalism, that I don't know, an Indian, black person are not well seen in society. How do we come together to Congress where Afro-descendants, where originary people meet and share and project a work agenda towards facing, to put on the struggles on the table and to say, we are here, we are being heard, and those who today still deny the existence, the importance that we have in the society, don't want to hear, but we are here and they must hear. How do we come to a Congress like this?
Well, first of all, the idea and the dream is not new. The Pan-African movement, Pan-Africanist movement is more than 120 years old. With the formation of the first African Association in Port of Spain, Trinidad in 1898, which led to the first Pan-African Conference in London of 1900. You then had a series of conferences organized by W.B. Du Bois and other forces between 1919 and 1945. You had literally millions of people in the streets under the leadership of Honorable Marcus Garvey from roughly 1919 till he made his transition in 1944. The big important conference, in my view, was 1945. People came together from different parts of Africa and the African diaspora, and they did more than talk. They planned that as best they could that phase of the independence struggle in Africa and in the US. And they also represented something more than individuals. That was the first conference, for example, where the majority of delegates were trade union or labor union, and some of the foundings of the independence movements and parties under the leadership of George Padmore, Kwame Nkrumah, a whole generation. Within 15 years of that conference, you had maybe 20 countries in Africa independent. The previous conferences was more talk. Coming from that 45 conference, which was basically English speaking, the forces, the progressive, revolutionary, and socialist forces in the French-speaking Africa met in Bamako, Mali, to form the African Democratic Rally. And coming from mass movements, vanguard parties that were developed throughout all of so-called French Africa, within 5 years, many of those countries, had at least what we call flag independence, neo-colonial independence. So that 45, 46 period was very important. It also coincides with the beginning of the baby boom generation. Our parents and grandparents were at that conference and led, but we were born into the movement, born into it. So that from 45, 46, by 1960, the baby boomers had become of generational and political age. And you literally had, some people call it 1960, the year of the college students. It is also the year of Africa, because it is that period where college students went to the streets and the barricades in the United States, in South Africa, in the Middle East, in every corner of the world. By 63, in my view, was the year of the high school students. You certainly had high school student rebellions in the United States. In April or May of 63, with Martin Luther King's desegregation campaign in Birmingham, Alabama, it is 3,000 high school students who went to the streets, and faced dogs and fire hoses. And in fact, it is that moment that you see the leap forward in terms of progress or the illusion of, brutality. Within 6 months of that 3,000 kids going to the streets, literally tens of millions of kids in the United States went to the streets. I was one of them. There would have been no March on Washington 63 had it not been for Birmingham. People talk about the role of workers, they talk about the role of politicians and preachers, but nobody talks about the role of high school kids. In South Africa, the PanAfrican Congress of Azania had organized the first liberation struggle, armed guerrilla struggle, in the southern part of the hemisphere. And over 3,000 of them were thrown in jail, Robben Island, at the same time. They were in Robben Island before Nelson Mandela was sent to Robben Island. They played football all night long, and they broke bricks all day long, and they built the cells. It is those old men who were the mentors of many of the young people in Southern Africa who are fighting today. I know them. When I go to South Africa, I stay with them. One high school student with another high school students. So we're just using those two, but I'm sure you can see the parable country by country. That's our generation. We have now aged, but to do quickly, you had the 68, and you now have the Black Lives Matter, the other forces who are in the streets today.
Talking about those forces and those who like yourself today are have a little bit more experience about the different struggle and the different stages in which this struggle have developed. You are a former Black Panther member, an organization that characterized for defending, for putting out this voice, this claim. How this Black Panther organization comes an active part of the society, the struggles being put on the social arena to understand, to hear this claim to make that you were making to the society?
Well, you can see it many different ways. You can, at this Afrodescendant Congress, I know who our biological and political babies are at this conference. Former Black Panthers who continue to work for the last 50 years. We had our own biological children. We worked with various age groups, for the last 50-some years. And I was just sitting up in the Congress sometimes smiling, because while other people didn't know who some of these young people were in different countries around the world, we knew who they were, because at different stages in their development politically, we helped recruit them, we helped mentor them, we helped introduce them to the movement, and we were very, very happy, because many of the forces at this Afro-Descendant Conference were young, younger than us certainly. There are younger people than them, 18 to 20 and 30 years old. They were for the most part in their 30s and 40s and 50s. But we saw the history, and we hope we also see the future, that hopefully this Afro-Descendant Congress over the next 5, 10 years will make tremendous gains and tremendous struggles. There were people literally, I believe, from 43 countries.
Is the Black Panther organization dead today, or is just a movement that have kept a lower profile in these few years?
The Black Panther movement was dead in 1969 as an organization.
But the spirit?
The spirit is even greater today. I mean, if you just look at the Marvel Comics Black Panther movie, it grossed $1.3 billion in every major continent and country in the world. So that's proof that the spirit is still alive. The organization itself was crushed, by various forces and whatnot. But individuals continued to work. Rap music, for example, is a product of the Panther Party. Tupac Shakur was born in jail. His mother was a Black Panther. And when he chose to go certain other ways, he still made his contribution politically, but Tupac is a Black Panther baby. We can see them at different levels, and we even see those who compromised and sold out. The children, the old folks who are Republicans and this and that and the other. We try as best we can to keep up with them, but we're very happy with this generation.
You are also a member of the All African People's Revolutionary Party. What kind of party is this? What kind of idea does it sense? How it binds together these thoughts?
Well, first of all, it was founded by a man named Kwame Nkrumah, who was one of the organizers of the 5th Pan-African Conference in '45. He led...
one of the founding fathers in Africa.
Of Congress, of Ghana. When the coup d'etat and other things went down, the corruption and the colonialism, he tried to figure out where do we go from here. So he called for the creation of an all-African People's Revolutionary Party and army at the level of the central committees of all the progressive and revolutionary political parties in Africa and the African world. He linked up with a man named Stokely Carmichael, Kwame, Ture, who reinvigorated the Black Power cry in '66, who is the real founder of the Black Panther Party. All 5 litters is not one Black Panther Party. Cats do not have one kitten at a time. They have litters, 3 to 7. So using that symbol, you can see, we know around the world who these different litters and forces were. They linked up. Kwame Nkrumah, he changed his name, Sokwe Michael to Kwame Ture. He married Miriam Makeba, who was one of the most famous singers of that era coming out of Zania, South Africa. And we moved from our faction, at least, moved from the Panther Party into the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And we've been struggling for 52 years. You know, it's hard, especially to build an ideological party. Thousands have come through our door, and thousands have left, and we see where they're at. You know, we saw at least 6 of them play key roles in this Afrodescendant Conference from the United States, from London, from Trinidad, from maybe about 7 to 8 countries. They come out of our milieu.
And which are the main points that you brought to this Congress, and which are the main points and the guidelines for this struggle to achieve victory?
2. One of the major differences of all those previous conferences was the emphasis on socialism and on true liberation that this African Descendant Congress portrayed. Secondly, for me, Cuba is the oasis of socialism. We look to Cuba as the best socialist model in country. But Venezuela is the fountainhead of the African and Afrodescendant Conference. There is no country in the world today where they would have brought, or they would have permitted 150 people from 43 countries of youth of this caliber to come and meet and discuss the future. So for me, Cuba, for African people in the world, is, it's Venezuela today. No disrespect to Cuba. It certainly has its progress, its socialist model and whatnot, but Venezuela is the base, is the fountainhead for the African and Afro-descendant movement in the world today.
Thank you very much, Robert.
Thank you.
Pleasure to have you here from Caracas to speak and to understand better about the struggles of the Pan-African movement around the world.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much. We've been talking with Robert Brown. He's a former Black Panther member, also a member of the All African Revolutionary Party, and he's been with us here from Caracas talking, sharing his ideas about the social struggles of the originary and the Afro-descendant people around the world, not only in Latin America, America, and the Caribbean. You continue with us. Thank you for your attention. Until next time.